And good morning to all of you. It is great to be here with you again. If you have a Bible, go ahead and open it up to John chapter 4. If you have a Pew Bible, I believe it's still page 863. If you would like to use the little sermon journals in front of you, I think it's page 20. John chapter 4, we are continuing a series that we began last week, looking at this familiar story of the woman at the well. And we saw last week was really the setup of the story, that Jesus is on his way from Jerusalem and he's going up to his hometown. He's going up to Nazareth. And we saw that typically faithful Jewish people would not go through Samaria on their way to get to Nazareth. Faithful Jewish people would go around Samaria and take the long way. They would either cross the Jordan River or go out into the sea just to avoid this one region because they hated these people so much. But what we saw last week was that Jesus doesn't care about the hatred that we have for one another. Jesus doesn't care about the walls that we have built up between ourselves and other people around us that we don't like. Jesus intentionally breaks down those walls and intentionally crosses into places where we wouldn't go and where we think he shouldn't be to meet other people and to share the good news of the gospel with those who need it. And so we saw last week that he did this. He went to the well, and when we left off, he was so exhausted from traveling all this way, from walking to where he had gone in Samaria, that we see him collapsed at the foot of the well with exhaustion from making it to this destination that most other people would avoid. And so that's where we pick up our text again today in John chapter 4, beginning in verse 7. So he makes it to the well. He's there wearied. It's about the 6th hour. Verse 7 says, "A woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink,' for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, 'How is it that you, being a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans.' And Jesus answered her, 'If you knew the gift of God, and who it is that is saying to you, "Give me a drink," you would have asked, and he would have given you living water.'" That's what we're going to look at today. That's our focus for today. I'm hoping that we can see what that living water is that he offered to this woman and that he offers to each of us if we will simply come and trust him. But before we go any further with our sermon today, would you pray one more time with me? Father, we thank you again for allowing us all the privilege of being here, the privilege of gathering with people who are pursuing you, the gathering with people who love you and hearing your word. I pray that we would never take that for granted, but that God, it would motivate us to go out into the world and to take the gospel with us, to take the hope that we have and to share it with others, that others might come to know you and come to be a part of this fellowship here where we find encouragement and hope and where we find reminders of what's really important in life. And so I pray that today you would do that again. You would remind us of what is truly important in our lives, what truly matters, of yourself and of your Son. And so, Father, I pray for this time. I ask that you would be with me as I teach, that you would forgive me of my sins, because they are many. And that today we would see Jesus and see Jesus alone and see him high and lifted up, that we might know him in a greater way and glorify him in a greater way with our lives. It's in your name we pray. Amen. So when we get into this story, as I said, Jesus has gone to a place where everyone in society would tell him he shouldn't be. He's walked to a place that he shouldn't be, and he's talking to a woman that he shouldn't talk to, because he's trying to show us the title of our sermon today. He's trying to show us that the gospel message is that the gospel and God's love is bigger than we think it is. When we think we've gone too far, when we think somebody else is beyond the reach of the gospel, we see in the Bible God moving exactly in that direction, exactly towards those people to save them and to redeem them. And so the first principle that we see in this text today is that Jesus will meet us regardless of where we are or where we have been. It doesn't matter in your life where you've been, what you've done. It doesn't matter how far you have wandered from the path that God has for you, from His grace and from His mercy. If you turn to Him, He will meet you there. And as we talked about last week, even if you don't know that you're turning to Him, He will pursue you in that place and meet you where you are. Look at verses 7 and 8. It says, "A woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food." Now this woman has two strikes against her. First, she's a Samaritan. As we talked about last week, Samaritans were considered half-breeds by the faithful Jewish people. They were considered traitors to their race because they had married into the Assyrians who had taken over the northern kingdom of Israel. These Samaritans had sold out for their own protection and sold out for their own safety so that they would be provided with the food that they needed and they would be spared from the Assyrian massacre that happened in their nation. And so they were looked down upon because in the mind of a faithful Jew, they should have been faithful to their God and they should have been faithful to their country and they should not have sold out the way that they did. But not only that, we read that this woman is a Samaritan, but she's also a woman. And in the Middle East, even today, women are treated as second-class citizens to the extent that if you were a man in that country and you were walking out with your wife somewhere, you would not speak to or acknowledge your wife when you were out in public. The only time you would talk to your wife was when you were at home and when she would essentially listen to whatever you had said. But other than that, a man would not speak to a woman, especially outside of the home, especially someone who was not his wife or his mother or his daughter. That just would not happen. And the third strike we see against this woman is that she comes to the well in the middle of the day. It says about the 6th hour. They measured their days from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So the 6th hour would be noon. She comes to the well in the middle of the day, at the hottest part of the day in the Middle East. Everyone else comes to the well really early in the morning to get their water for the day, or really late at night to get their water for the next day. And they come at those times for simple reasons, because that's when you get cold water. That's when the water's been sitting in the dark for the longest. That's when it's been down in the well and has been cooled. It hasn't been bothered by the heat of the day. And these wells were placed strategically right in the middle of towns. So it would be right in the middle of Chewton, like say right out here at this intersection. They would put a well. And that well would not only be a place where you would come and get water, but it was really the center of society at that time. It was where the in crowd met. It was where decisions were made. If you were in the in group, you showed up there early because you wanted to find out what was going on in your town and you wanted to be someone who mattered. It was, to put it in church terms that we might understand, like They say there's the meeting that you have, but then there's the meeting before the meeting, and there's the meeting after the meeting where decisions are really kind of made. This meeting at the well would be the meeting before the meeting that they would have. Before any decisions were made in society, they were made in discussions around the well. And so people placed a great value on being present at the well during those discussions. You showed up early because you wanted to show the world that you mattered, that you were significant, that you were somebody who was making an impact, and that they needed you in this place. It was a place where you went to get a validation for your own sense of self-worth. It was a place where you went to feel like you mattered, like you meant something to the people around you and to the world. And I would say that it's very different today, but I would also argue that we're really not so different from them today. Today, we don't have wells in the middle of town that we go and we meet at, but we have social media, right? And we have friend groups, and we have clubs that we're a part of, and we today seem to all want to attach ourselves to something bigger than ourselves. We want to be a part of some cause, right? We want to do something great and something grand and something big because we want our lives to matter, and we want to feel significant. We want other people to recognize us as significant. And so they would go early in the morning. They would discuss these issues, and then they would puff up with pride and say, yeah, I did something for this community. I matter here. I matter in this place. And they couldn't last without me, unless you think that I'm just saying that this is what happened. This is actually a confession, because I do this same thing as well. And I think if we're all honest, you do it too. You go to places and you specifically position yourself places where you think you will make a difference, or where you can feel like you matter. And there's nothing wrong with that, but when we find our source of worth and our source of value in a place we go to or in a cause we're attached to, it ultimately is not going to last, right? The only one who can truly give us worth, the only one who can truly tell us that our life matters, is the one who came and who died for us, the one who this woman is about to meet at the well. But it's important to note that this woman clearly doesn't want any of that. She doesn't want people to know that she's around. She doesn't care that people think she matters. She doesn't care that people think she's significant. She knows that she doesn't have a role in this community. And so most scholars say that she comes to this well at noon because she is ashamed. She comes to this well at noon because she knows, yeah, I'm going to have to get warm water. I'm going to have to suffer with lukewarm water for the rest of today and maybe the rest of tomorrow, but at least nobody will be here and will put me down. Most believe that this woman has probably been told over and over and over again, whether explicitly or just through simple actions and ignoring her, that you don't belong here. That you should go over where sinners like you go, that we don't want anything to do with you here. And so that's why she comes to the well at noon, which I don't know if you've ever been to the Middle East in the middle of the summer, but at noon it's going to be upwards of 90 to 100 degrees when she walks there just to get some lukewarm water. And she walks there in all of her layers of clothing and robes that she would have had to wear to go out into public as a woman. And not only does she walk there with her empty jars, once she gets there and fills them with the lukewarm water, then she has to carry these 2 jars on her shoulders over all of her clothing back home in 90-degree heat. She is so desperate to not be seen, to not be made to feel less, to not be made to feel inferior, to not have to face her shame, that she will face all of that instead. And she might even get to the place where she feels like she deserves this. Like she's made her lot in life. She's done whatever she's done. We'll learn next week what that is. But she just has to live with this now. This is her life. This is her lot because of the life that she is chosen to live. But we saw last week that even though she comes in the middle of the day and she comes in her shame and she comes in her guilt, Jesus meets her there, and Jesus walks through her shame and helps her to walk through her shame so that she can experience the freedom that he offers. The freedom that we can only find in the grace and mercy and love of Jesus Christ. It's the freedom that Paul writes about in Ephesians chapter 2. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 17 and 18, Paul says these amazing words. He says, "And he," meaning Jesus, "came and preached peace to those who were far off and peace to those who were near. For through him we both have access to the Spirit, through the Spirit to the Father." That when we come to this place, when we come to the church and we look at Jesus, we realize that the only qualification any of us have for being here is to admit and to recognize that we're not qualified to be here. That we shouldn't be here if it's up to our works and if it's up to our righteousness. I think, like society, we too often get the idea that our value is based on what we can do and on working our way up the ladder, whether that's the ladder at work and doing more and getting a promotion, or whether that's the ladder of your social circle, either here or wherever you spend your time. But what Paul is telling us in Ephesians, and what Jesus shows us by showing up and meeting us in our place of shame, is that we can't even get to the first rung of that ladder on our own. We can't even make it there. And that should humble us, and that should cause us to look to God with love, realizing that the welcome that he offers us is so radical and so amazing that he's willing to come, and he's willing to love us where we are, and he's willing to meet us where we are. But not just that, he's willing to meet us where we are so that he can transform our lives and take us to where we need to be. So my message for you this morning is really simple. Are you screwed up? Is your life a mess? Are you hopeless? Do you feel like you're lost without an answer? Me too. But luckily, it's not about me and what I can do. I don't have any of the answers. But I want to introduce you to one who can carry you to where you need to be, to the only one who can save you, to the only one who can sustain you and restore the life that you were meant to have. And his name is Jesus. And that's what this woman is about to learn. See, the second thing we see in this text is that Jesus will not only meet us regardless of where we are, but he'll meet us regardless of who we are. In verse 9, after Jesus has asked for the drink, the Samaritan woman replies and says, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." As I said at the beginning, a typical Jewish man would not even speak to his wife in public. They absolutely would not do what Jesus is about to do and discuss theological issues with a woman, especially in public. So her arrival is really, for the typical Jew, a crisis of faith. In all honesty, what Jesus should have done, according to the Pharisees and Sadducees and leaders of that time, would probably be, when this woman comes up and goes to talk to him, he should run and go somewhere else. See, they thought that discussions of God and discussions of higher things were reserved for men, and they were reserved not only for men, but for wealthy men in the upper echelon of society. That if you were not one of the Pharisees, if you were not one of these leaders, you weren't supposed to talk about God. You weren't supposed to question anything that they said. You were just supposed to follow the spiritual leadership of those above you. For the lower class men, that would mean the Pharisees. For women, that would mean their husband in the home. That they shouldn't be asking these questions in public. They should ask them of their spouse in their home. And if you know the story, you know that that's going to be a major problem for this woman. She doesn't have a husband to ask these questions to. And the men that she has had in her life were clearly not the best examples of faithfulness and of godly character. And so this woman's concerned. She asked Jesus why he's there, because we know from history that Jewish men would often go and they would talk and meet with women who did not have very socially acceptable careers, women who worked at night. And so she is there and she's thinking the only reason someone like him would be here to talk to someone like me at this time of day is if he has impure motives. And so she asks him why he's even talking to her. She says, let's just get this out in the open and get it over with right now. And you can almost hear as she talks, the walls go up in her heart and the walls go up in her mind. She thinks, are you just going to use me? Are you just going to do what these other men, even some who have called themselves faithful men, have done to me? Are you just going to use me and leave me like everyone else? And maybe you have that question today. Maybe that's why you haven't been able to trust God, is because you think that he's going to treat you just like everyone else has. But I'm here today to tell you that Jesus breaks down your walls not to make you uncomfortable or to open you to more abuse, but he removes your walls to set you free. He crosses into your territory and he breaks down the walls that you have built up for your own protection to set you free and to give you life and to give you hope in him. And that can be hard because I know that all of us deal with hurt. And it's even harder because a lot of us don't like to surrender control of our lives to someone else. See, but before we can be willing to see God for who he is, we have to be willing to give up all of our false perceptions of him. We have to be willing to give up on the idea that he doesn't care about us or that he doesn't hear us when we're in a place of difficulty or when we're in a place of pain. Instead, the key is to see that when we face our difficulties and we face where we truly are lax in our own understanding, and we're honest about that, we actually just walk into those places, it places us on the path to life, on the path to know God in a greater way. See, if I can fully grasp God in my 5-pound brain, if I could fully understand everything about him, he's not really worthy of worship. He's a lot bigger than we think he is. And this is what Jesus is trying to teach this woman. Essentially what he's saying is, tell me about the God that you don't believe in. Because maybe I don't believe in him either. I think that's a powerful statement that we can make to the world around us, is tell me about the God you don't believe in, because maybe I don't believe in him either. See, if we're going to worship God, it's very important that we worship the right one, that we worship the true God. And in Jeremiah chapter 2, we see what happens when we abandon the pursuit of the one true God and we settle for any one of a number of cheap substitutes that we find in the world. Jeremiah chapter 2 verse 13 says, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and they have hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. See, people, when they fail to pursue God, they don't pursue nothing. They pursue whatever brokenness is in themselves, whatever brokenness is in their heart. That's another key. When people walk away from faith in the one true God, they don't worship nothing, they worship anything. Let me say that again. When you walk away from faith in the one true God, you don't worship nothing, you worship anything. You will seek and look for any place to find value, and any place to find worth, and any place to find hope. But the problem is that you turned away from the one person, the one being who can actually provide all of those things. And I think we've all seen people, and it's so sad to watch someone to go from place to place to place, or from thing to thing, from habit to habit, and addiction to addiction, looking for something, looking for significance, something to give them a sense of self-worth, when what the Father says and what we need to say is just turn around, just go back to the beginning, go back to where you started. See, we live in this culture today where our mantra seems to be to question everything. And many people my age and younger will take that and they'll question their upbringing, they'll question the faith that they were given as a child. But I would encourage people not to not ask questions, but to actually keep asking questions. And to ask questions of the questions that you asked that led you away from the only true spring of living water. What were the questions that you had that you felt were unanswered that led you away from where God is? And maybe question those questions, and it'll lead you to see that He really had something, that He was really the source of everything that you need. That's what Jeremiah tries to tell his people later on in chapter 17, verse 13. He says, O Lord, you are the hope of Israel. All who forsake you will be put to shame. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust, because they have forsaken the Lord, the spring of living water. And that can seem like a very negative verse, but there's hope in that, because the hope is found when you realize that the opposite is also true. That if you turn towards God, you will be sustained and made new. If you turn towards Him, you will find a fountain of living water that will never run dry and never end. That's really the irony that we see in this third and the fourth chapter of John. If you remember back in chapter 3, we looked at Nicodemus, who was a Jewish leader who knew all the right things to say, knew all the right rituals to practice, knew everything he was supposed to know to see the Messiah, and yet missed it when he was standing right in front of him. And here we see a Samaritan woman who is supposedly the most hopeless, outcast, worthless person to a Jew that you could ever find, and yet she's going to be the one who gets it. And I would say that she gets it because she allows herself to be brought to the end of herself. She gets it because she recognizes that it's not about what we can make or what we can miss or what we do. It's about recognizing that you and I can never make it on our own, and trusting in His power to transform. See, that's the final point I have for us today, is that Jesus meets us in order to transform us. Jesus meets us to change us and to make us new. He says in verse 10, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked Him, and He would have given you living water. Note that He's willing to give. He says, do you know the gift, or do you want to know the gift? Just come and receive it. Come and receive the living water that I offer. I'm here today to tell you that it is that simple. If you feel called, if you feel drawn to Him, just come to Him and receive the hope, receive the living water that He offers. There's no conditions to come other than to come. And when you come, you'll find that he will make you his own, and he will transform you into the man or woman that he has called you to be. And whatever you've done in your life that makes you feel unworthy, whatever you've done to push him away, when you walk towards Jesus, when you make that commitment, when you turn your eyes upon him, you see that his love and his mercy are far bigger than anything that you could have thrown in his way. And so that's really the invitation today, is to come to the eternal well. A well that will never run dry, and a well that can provide you with what you truly need. Maybe not even what you knew you need, but what God knows that you need and what will truly satisfy you. It's the only thing that will, and it's only found in Jesus Christ. So we're going to sing a final song of commitment together, and when we do, I'll come down front. The other elders will come as well. We would invite you to come if you have a need for prayer or would like to make a commitment to the Lord. But would you stand with me?